Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff. I volunteered with Raleigh International earlier this year in Tanzania, working on an entrepreneurship program. So I'm going to give you a few insights on how we supported youth micro-entrepreneurship in Tanzania. You'll see the ICS slogan there, challenge yourself to change your world. That felt particularly appropriate a week or so ago when I got an email out of the blue asking if I'd like to speak in front of an audience of international experts, but challenge accepted. I'm here. I didn't know it was going to be filmed. So what I'm hoping I'm going to give you is a bit of a case study, really. So an example of how an intercultural team of volunteers can help inspire entrepreneurship and leave a legacy as well. So hopefully in just under 15 minutes time, you should know a bit more than you do now. So firstly, what is Raleigh ICS? How can a team of volunteers inspire entrepreneurship? And I suppose particularly relevant for this conference today, how is that entrepreneurship then sustained? So Raleigh is, for those who don't know, a sustainable development charity working with and through young people to create a lasting change. They're one of 9 partner organisations that were selected to deliver international citizen service, which is a DFID-funded programme that provides volunteer placements for young people. One of the key things about ICS is that it doesn't require people to have money or particular skills or qualifications to apply. People are selected on the basis of their ambition to make a difference. And as you can see there, it's more than just a placement. There's a training element, there's a fundraising element, and volunteers also do an action at home after they've come back from their placement abroad. One of the other things about ICS is that it's not just UK volunteers going into a country and volunteering. We actually worked in partnership with in-country volunteers. So this is my team that I worked with in Tanzania. We were called Echo 4, which is one of the Raleigh kind of codes. And half of the team were Tanzanian volunteers, half from the UK. And as I said at the start, we were working on an entrepreneurship project. So our goal was to recruit young people in the village. We were working in a village in rural Tanzania called Ikando. And to give them some entrepreneurship training leading up to a pitch. So there was some loan funding provided through the ICS program that was available to the entrepreneurs. So why were we doing an entrepreneurship program at all? And why did we select rural Tanzania as a place to do it? As you can see, a lot of the Tanzanian population are very young, 66% of the population under the age of 25, a figure that's growing. There has been a huge growth in Tanzanian GDP in recent years, but that tends to have left the rural areas behind. Most of the opportunities are in urban areas, and what that's led to is actually a lack of opportunities for young people in rural Tanzania, leading to young people migrating into cities. There's also a report by the Overseas Development Institute. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly, but it highlighted some of the other barriers that young people face in Tanzania. So there's an education system that ignores entrepreneurship. It's actually based on the old UK system of O-levels and A-levels. There tends to be a lack of sort of skills, mentors. There's not really training available for people to learn and pick up entrepreneurship skills. There's limited access to capital, very few financial institutions, particularly in rural areas. There's also something of a social stigma around starting a business. There's a fear of failure that's been identified in this report, and also an element of stigma around women starting businesses as well in some areas in Tanzania. And my own experience reflected a lot of this, I think. There was a young population in the village. Most of them were working on family farms. There didn't appear to be very many opportunities. The infrastructure in our village, as highlighted by the picture there, is particularly poor. The roads in and out of the village were pretty terrible. There wasn't electricity, there's no running water, and actually the village I worked in kind of lacked any kind of town centre or commercial hub as well. So a really difficult place, basically, to start becoming an entrepreneur. So what did we do about that? Well, we had an entrepreneurship curriculum, and as I said, a small amount of training before we went. And we delivered entrepreneurship sessions. So we recruited young people from the village, and we ran these sessions from 12:30 till 3 p.m. every weekday. That was because people tend to be working in the fields in the mornings, and there was a milking time around 3 p.m. So we worked with the young people in the village to find a time that suited them. And we worked in pairs, so each session was divided into sections, and each section was taken by one UK and one Tanzanian volunteer. The sessions were delivered in Swahili, but a lot of the work behind them was also done by the UK volunteers. And this is just an idea of what we were teaching them. So actually, we had to prepare people for pitching within 7 or 8 weeks. Bearing in mind, a lot of them have only had primary school education. A lot of my team of volunteers had no background in entrepreneurship. It's a big challenge, but I actually genuinely think it was really successful. And as you can see, we were teaching, helping to support ideas, teaching around, we used a business model canvas to help them develop their business ideas. We helped teach about cash flow and finance. And it got to a point after 7 weeks where we had a good number of the entrepreneurs that we've been supporting who were actually ready to stand in front of a panel of people, defend their business ideas, talk through their cash projections for the next year, and how it fitted a need in the village. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of the entrepreneurs that we worked with for a moment now. So this is Stephen. Stephen was actually my homestay bubba, so I stayed in his house for 11 weeks with his wife and his young daughter, Naima, and his cows and his goats and his chickens. So you can see here that there's a couple of pictures with some grass. One of his business ideas was to provide animal feed all year round. So not only cultivating grass, but then drying and storing it. And he was actually particularly ambitious. He had 2 business ideas. His other one was to deliver milk to the local town. So there was a lot of milk production in the village that we were working in. And he was hoping that he could make some money by collecting it all and delivering it to a local town. I've included a picture of him cooking there because that's actually quite revelationary. Men don't tend to cook very much, certainly from my experience in Tanzania. But he saw me cooking a couple of times and was inspired enough to join in. I've got a short video of Stephen, hopefully saying some things about what he learnt on the program.
Nazalisha malisho, nilikuwa sijafanya uchunguzi wa wateja yani nilikuwa nategemea tu akitokea basi. Kwa hiyo saa hizi baada ya mafunzo haya nimepata kufanya utafiti, soko linapatikana wapi, na huo ndo uhakika nitazalisha zaidi na nitauza zaidi kwa wateja wengi ndani ya kijiji na nje ya kijiji hiki. Cha pili, ukusanyaji wa maziwa. Ukusanyaji wa maziwa utanipa faida kubwa ambayo ni hatima ya kufikia malengo yangu ya 2025 ya kuwa na kiwanda cha maziwa.
Perhaps not necessarily groundbreaking entrepreneurial ideas, but what all of the entrepreneurs we were supporting did do was identify issues in the village, things that weren't provided currently, and think about how they could fill that gap. So the next entrepreneur I'm going to introduce you to is Leah. Leah was actually a bit of a superstar. Before we even met her, she had done a bit of training in artificial insemination. And she was looking for a loan in order to buy some of the equipment that she had previously been renting, so that obviously she could make a greater profit when she was doing the artificial insemination of cattle. But also to she wanted some extra money for transport, because she worked out that actually there was an opportunity for her to work in a wider district than just the neighbouring villages. So there she is speaking at one of our events and with one of her young children, and there are some words from Leah as well.
Yani mimi kwa kweli yani kwa wenzetu hao wajasiriamali ambao wamefika hapa vijijini wamesaidia mambo makubwa sana. Kwa mfano mimi nilikuwa sijui masuala ya cash flow, alafu nilikuwa sijui mpango wa biashara unakaeje, lakini jinsi walivyofika hawa wajasiriamali nimejifunza vitu vingi sana.
Great. So those were a couple of the entrepreneurs. We actually worked with, well, 30, but some of them started dropping out. We worked with a core group of about 20 for the 7 weeks up to pitching. And we were really pleased that 14 of those were confident enough with their new business ideas from the training that they'd received to actually, as I say, stand in front of a panel, some of which were from a local savings and credit cooperative, and there was one of the Raleigh ICS staff there as well. And 10 of those that pitched were successful in receiving these loans, which we were really pleased about. The loans came to 4 million Tanzanian shillings, which sounds like quite a lot. The average loan size was about 4,000, which is probably about £175. So it is a kind of microfinance loan, and they had 1 year to pay these loans back. So they have fully costed plans for how that's going to happen. Although the entrepreneurship program was the main focus of what we were doing, we also worked in lots of other areas. So as it says here, we founded a women's group. We also worked in the school, built community gardens. Sounds a bit like I'm just bragging now, but this isn't a comprehensive list. There were lots of other things that the Raleigh volunteers did while we were in the village and integrated into the community. So as I said, there's an Overseas Development Institute report into the Raleigh ICS entrepreneurship program, looking at both Tanzania and Nicaragua. And it recognized that actually the program was bringing hard skills to these youths, the youth entrepreneurs. So business skills, as I mentioned, some of the finance, cash flow, idea generation skills. There's also technical skills, and they were provided by a project partner. We worked with East African Dairy Development in Tanzania, and they provided a few training sessions around dairy farming. Not only that, but the program gave some of the volunteers, some of the entrepreneurs confidence as well. A lot of them would have been absolutely terrified of pitching at the start of it. Not really used to public speaking. It's not something that's particularly encouraged in the school system. So that was something that was developed as well as leadership. You saw a picture of Leia speaking at one of our events. And actually punctuality was another big one. We had a lot of issues towards the start of the program trying to get people to turn up on time, but that improved a bit towards the end as well. We also tried to find mentors in the area, and this is not something that we found particularly easy. But the idea and what the ODI report found was that where mentors had been identified, actually that really helped to find a role model in the community that could talk people through entrepreneurship and what they should be doing with their business. Access to finance, obviously, I mentioned at the start, one of the barriers to entrepreneurship, particularly in rural areas, is the lack of financial institutions and money available. So the fact that Raleigh worked and negotiated a special interest rate, especially low interest rates for the loans, and provided the finance, obviously helped overcome that barrier. So as I said at the start, the third thing that I wanted to talk about is how that entrepreneurship legacy is sustained. So one of the ways is through community acceptance. As I said, there's a social stigma in some areas, and I think we helped to overcome that by holding an event about entrepreneurship, by raising awareness about the benefits of entrepreneurship in the village, and just by the visual presence of these people learning and spreading the information about what they'd been learning. I think that the fact that the entrepreneurs themselves were talking to other people in the village and actually spreading some of the things that we'd taught them is also really important. We heard stories in our village about people that were then helping their families with their businesses based on some of the things they had learnt. And there's also an example, I think it was one of the 2015 Raleigh ICS entrepreneur projects in a village called Nundu, where they actually set up an entrepreneurship hub. So they used some of the teaching to then kind of set up a school where they were teaching other people to some of the entrepreneurship stuff that they'd learnt. We provided legacy packs, so when we left the village, we left all of the training materials behind, as well as contact details for financial institutions and for mentors. Raleigh also follow up with all of the projects. So I think they were doing it every year, going back and talking to the people that have been involved. I think that's now moved to 6 months. And Raleigh's other programs, so aside from ICS, they run expeditions and they work with, I know they've done some work with Google. So there were some volunteers from Google out in Tanzania going back to one of the villages that had already received an entrepreneurship program and working out how technology might be able to also be involved in their businesses. One thing I'm just going to focus on for a minute is volunteer empowerment, and I'm not entirely sure whether this was one of the aims of the program necessarily, but as I said, half of my team were in-country volunteers, so we're Tanzanians, and actually I think I'm mainly just quite proud of the next bit. So this, as you saw, is my team, and that's Hussein and Nicolaus there, and on the left in action on various things that we were doing in the village. They've actually set up a business since they volunteered on the program. They're working with some producers in the local area and have set up this business called Kaka Africa, and there's some of the Raleigh staff with Hussein in the middle modeling their t-shirts. This is John, and John was, I think, so inspired by some of the conversations we were having around gender equality. A lot of our entrepreneurs were women, and we actually had a target of making sure that at least 50% of them were, which we definitely surpassed. But one of the conversations we were having was actually about male attitudes towards women and how often female empowerment or projects will target women. And indeed, we set up a women's group in the village where there wasn't one previously. But what John's now done since he volunteered on the program is to set up a charity speaking to young men to try and encourage them to be, the charity is called Wazazi Bora Kwa Watoto Bora, which means good parents for good children. So for people to be good children, to be good parents, to respect their mothers and respect their wives. So I think just it's really interesting that it's not only the kind of direct audience, the entrepreneurs in the village that have benefited from taking part, but also some of the in-country volunteers. That's basically all I was going to say. I've got just one more video clip. I should say we actually made the video as a team while we were on placement. It's got my co-team leader, Hassan, introducing the legacy, followed by the deputy head of the school, the village chairman, and then a slightly cheesy ending where we look at the future of entrepreneurship in Akando.
Perhaps the most significant legacy is the new generation of entrepreneurs. It is hoped that these young people will act as role models for the next generation in Akando.
Vile vile awali vijana, kwa upande wa vijana wameweza kupata elimu mbalimbali. Mfano elimu ya ujasiriamali, na ile elimu wameweza kuitumia hata nyumbani.
Kutokana na programu hii ambayo tumeipata sisi hapa kwenye kijiji chetu hiki cha Akando, faida ambazo tumezipata, kwanza wajasiriamali wote ambao wamekuja kufanya wamefanya mafunzo wamefaidika, kwa maana ya elimu ile imewakaa kichwani na wameshaieneza hata kwa wananchi na watu wengine wameikubali.